Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And tonight our theme is Exploration is the Essence of the Human Spirit. And with that, our theme, talking about discovery, we have three accomplished women joining our lineup tonight, an all-female night. We have Katie Jones, founder and creator of the Revolution music series at National Sawdust in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Founded in March 2016, the Revolution is an emerging performance series highlighting Brooklyn and Harlem-based artists, plus musicians that are not only represented by the core of independent pop culture, but who currently stand in the breeding ground of evolution within their genre. Then we have joining with us Tanya Molina. Tanya is representing the African Roots in Latin American Festival that's this weekend in the Bronx, a Carafuna Festival. And her organization was created to provide more visibility and cultural connections via dialogue and education. And then we also have with us Barbara Pollock, independent curator and critic who writes regularly about contemporary art and Chinese art in such publications as the New York Times, Art News, Art and Auction, and Art in America. Her expertise, cultural leaders, art, global art movements, and emerging centers, particularly in China. So we have a packed evening for everyone. We're going to start off with Barbara. Barbara, are you on the line?
Yes.
Thank you so much for agreeing to join us this evening. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm excellent.
Great. And the reason we invited Barbara is because starting next week, we're going to have in New York City the 12th edition of Asia Contemporary Art Week, a very ambitious calendar packed with exhibitions, pop-up installations, artist talks, other types of receptions to focus on contemporary art in China. And that is something a lot of us are not very knowledgeable about. And Barbara is indeed an expert. So, Barbara, let's start off with your experience, because you have a very extensive background with the New York Times, Art News, Art and Auction about contemporary art in China. So why don't you tell us, how did that all begin for you?
It began for me because in the 1990s, a lot of the leading artists from China were living here in New York because they had left China after the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Ah.
And so I met many of them and interviewed them in the late 1990s. And I love their stories. I mean, if you're interested in political art, these are artists who lived through such history and such political upheavals. Mm-hmm. So it was fascinating to meet them. And then in 2004, a good friend of mine, Meg Maggio, who is a dealer in Beijing, mm-hmm. yelled at me. She screamed at me. She said, "You can't write about Chinese artists by staying in New York. You have to come to China."
Okay.
So she helped me go on my first trip to China, which was in 2004. And immediately, as soon as I went there, I saw that this was going to be a major art scene. Mm-hmm. At the time, there were only a few galleries and only a handful of museums showing contemporary art, but I could see they were on the verge of exploding.
Okay.
And that's exactly what happened over the course of the next 10 years.
Wow. I mean, I'm not as savvy about contemporary Chinese art, But from some of the artists' work that I have seen in various galleries, particularly in Chelsea, I'm seeing something very different. And a lot of women. There are a lot of women. One in particular that we both seem to like is Lin Tian Miao. Is that how you pronounce her name? Yeah, she's very good. I think she's very provocative.
She's probably the leading woman artist in China. Certainly, she came up with the generation of artists from the 1990s,
okay.
And there weren't many women at all. I mean, there would be like one woman artist to every 20 man artists in that generation. And the installation she has now in Chelsea at Gallery Lelong is fascinating. She's taken dozens of vintage carpets and embroidered them with in thick wool pile with words for woman in various languages from around the world. So, you know, I was just looking at it today. So there's everything from Mother China to, you know, to, I can't even remember right now. There's so many of them. She had collected 2,000 words for woman from the Internet.
Okay.
A lot of slang words or derogatory terms, but also things like goddess or Mother Earth, and embroidered it into these carpets. And in the gallery, you can walk across the carpet.
And what I like about it, because it's very tactile, you actually get to walk on
right.
the
It is very tactile.
Yeah, on the installation. What I find very compelling is that the fact there aren't that many noted Chinese women artists, and she's had to really push through in order to make a name for herself. We are very familiar with Ai Weiwei, who's also opening up for a public art installation that will commemorate the 40th anniversary for the Public Art Fund. And he's well known, but you don't hear too much about the women. And I'm wondering, what challenges do they face as they try to get their voices heard?
Oh, I would say that the situation for women artists in China it's changing with young artists, but for most women artists in China, the challenges are like what women artists here in the United States faced in the 1970s. I mean,
really?
In school, the professors believe that the men are going to have careers. They don't believe it's so important for women to have careers. There's a lot of discrimination in the galleries, and nobody even sees this as discrimination. They just see it as, you know, that you're to blame if you don't have a career. So people just internalize it and take it personally.
Wow, that is something else. And so she's been persevering, because she's been around for quite some time.
She has. She's been around for 20, 30 years.
Right. Who are some of the other artists that we should be paying attention to during this month-long, it's practically a month-long celebration of contemporary Asian art?
Well, one thing, a quick way to find out about a lot of great Chinese artists is that the Guggenheim is opening a show called Theater of the World, China, from 1989 to 2008. That will open on Thursday, October 5th.
Yes.
And that has 70 artists from China in it, starting with the late 1980s.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that exhibition as well. I'm going to be taking a group of people next week to see that. I was very impressed. And I know that they also had to deal with the controversy of the video where animal rights activists were believing that they were harming animals in some way. And
I mean, the actual story is that no animals were harmed making that video. But I understand that it affected people's sensibilities. But a lot of the work that got made in China in the 1990s is supposed to offend people. It's supposed to shake people up. Because you have to understand, these artists are living in a very repressive government. They had very few venues to show their work. Most of them were showing their work in each other's apartments because there were no galleries in China in the 1990s.
That's where the term apartment art came about?
That's where the term apartment art came from. and they were all working underground.
Mm-hmm.
You did not have the ability to show in a museum in China. You had to be an official artist to show in a museum.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were trying to make art that would shake people up. And a lot of that art is genuinely disturbing.
Okay.
It's
not meant to be pretty.
It's not meant to be pretty, but it does communicate something about how difficult life in China can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that because there was the controversy last year when Creative Time had an artist who was using pigeons. And I received numbers of calls. The New York Times did. I remember Untapped City, a reporter I knew. We all went checking to see if the birds were actually being harmed. In fact, the artist owned, I would say 70% of the birds. They were not harmed, but people believed that they were being harmed. But I like what you have done by explaining all of this. It's not to, hurt any animals or make a statement about animals, but it's sort of a metaphor talking about what life was like in China at that particular time. And people need to calm down so that they can understand all the challenges that many of these artists are going through. Now, these artists that are participating in art in China and Asia Contemporary Art Week, are they still residing in China, or do most of them live in Europe or in the United States?
Most of them still live in China.
Mm-hmm.
Ai Weiwei no longer lives in China.
No, he's in Berlin.
He's based in Berlin now because of all the difficulties he had in China.
Right.
There are a few leading artists that live either in New York or Paris, like Sai Kuo Chang, who's basically known as the fireworks guy.
Okay.
He's done many spectacles, including the opening ceremony of the 2008 Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
And Wang Yangping lives in Paris. He is one of the most represented artists in the Guggenheim show.
Okay.
But the vast majority still live in China. And there are things that China allows artists to do, even though it's a very repressive country.
Okay.
But because production is really cheap there.
Ah.
So you can have a huge studio in China. You can have assistants. You can make monumental works because it's much easier to produce a work of art in China than as an artist in New York City.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense for me. I was dealing with Japanese artists, but the language is the same. They were talking about assistants and it was like this sort of, it felt like an assembly line sort of, viewpoint when it came to the production of their work. So you helped me in that particular area. I deal with a lot of artists. I curate art myself. I showcase a lot of artists and galleries. And so you helped me to understand that sensitivity of the culture. I did not know that.
And something that people don't realize is that there's a huge market for art in China.
Really?
Oh, yes. China has an art market that's as big as the United States art market at this point.
And what are they collecting?
Some is collecting antiquities and from previous dynasties,
Mm-hmm.
that type of work,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of work you'd see at China Institute.
Yes, and have you seen that exhibition?
No, I haven't, but
Woo!
it's fantastic.
See that
the treasures
jade.
of the Han Dynasty. It should be fantastic.
See the jade burial suit. It is amazing. Over 4,000 pieces of jade.
So a lot of what Chinese collectors are collecting are things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a huge market for contemporary art in China that Chinese people themselves are collecting.
That's really impressive because even though in the United States we have a huge contemporary art scene, we're still struggling to get average Americans to collect contemporary art.
Well, I can't say the average Chinese person is collecting contemporary art, but China is producing a lot of millionaires.
Okay. So
Like
they have
a
the
lot.
means, and they have the means to therefore buy it.
Yes.
All right. But still,
but you definitely see huge crowds at the Chinese art museums of all sorts of people, from school groups to grandparents. are in the art museum.
But
like
they're still
something that would surprise
cultivating.
people to know is that in Shanghai there's 8 contemporary art museums.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. That's a real statement.
So China has gone from the 1990s, when artists had no place to exhibit, to the 2000s, where there are so many art museums that most artists have an ongoing museum career.
Wow. That's what I'm still saying, because it's impressive, because still here in this country, our numbers seem to be shrinking when it comes to the most well-known contemporary artists. And we're constantly debating about diversity, the inclusion of women, the inclusion of people of color. And here you're telling me in China, they got more museums probably than they have artists to fill.
There's a definite problem about filling the museums. So many have been built.
Wow. And are they only interested in contemporary Chinese art, or are they interested in other types of art?
At the beginning, they were only interested in Chinese art, but now they're definitely showing international artists in some of the museums.
So their taste is evolving, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. And so I'm trying to also understand, and I'm sure it will be very difficult. You know, there's so much backdrop. But it seems like the Chinese government is trying to allow the world to see them in a different light. They just have differences with certain artists, like with Ai Weiwei, but they do seem willing to try to show a different China. Is that correct?
Yes, I think to a large extent the Chinese government is supportive of contemporary art. It's a huge industry. Mm-hmm. It's an industry that keeps a lot of wealthy people happy, which is very important to the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. But under the current administration in China, censorship has gotten much worse in the last 2 years, and so more conflicts are coming up.
Are you talking about the Chinese government or the American government?
The Chinese government.
Oh, okay. All right, so there's more conflicts.
Yes.
And do you think that's because of all the political, chaos that's going on in Europe and in the United States politically?
I think that China wants... The Chinese government is very concerned about not opening the door to political resistance.
Okay.
That is their primary purpose.
Okay.
Is to shut down resistance.
Okay.
And the current administration, because of things like the Arab Spring and because of political controversies happening in Europe and the United States, are more conservative than even before. So they are being much more repressive about things like the Internet. But with contemporary art, it frankly doesn't reach as many people as the Internet or television or the movies. It reaches a much smaller group of people, so they feel like they can allow people to express themselves somewhat in this realm and be more strict in other realms.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make a lot of sense. Okay. I mean, they're kind of curating what gets viewed, what does not get viewed, what is shared, what is not shared. But I want to thank you because this was quite an impressive conversation we had. You gave me and our audience such an insight on contemporary Chinese art, and I'm not an expert in that area, but I am open to learning more. And it's not just about China, it's the whole region. So that's also Japanese, Korean art, Southeast Asian art, Himalayan art, as well as art from Afghanistan, because a lot of people don't realize Afghanistan is on the Asian continent. So learning all of this is very helpful because it's a huge, huge continent with a number of countries and cultures. And I think it behooves us to have a better understanding and appreciation for the arts. So I just want to say thank you.
Yes, it's a huge part of the world. It's a huge population. Mm-hmm. So we should pay attention to what's going on there.
I really do agree. So thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us today. And I hope to see you during Asia Contemporary Art Week.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we had a delightful conversation with Barbara Pollock. She's a real bigwig. She's a real expert when it comes to Chinese contemporary art. She has written for so many publications, ArtNet, Art and Auction, New York Times, Art in America. So it was wonderful that we were able to have her on the show just as Asia Contemporary Art Week kicks off in New York City. Last week, if you remember, we had Leza Ahmadi, who heads ACAW, A-C-A-W, and they're the ones who are spearheading this almost month-long celebration of contemporary Chinese and Southeast Asian artwork. So I think this is wonderful. We're getting a better perspective. I will be hopping all over Chelsea on the 12th when they have a big night, as well as the Guggenheim, and we'll be reporting back to you. So now we have another innovative person that is joining us in the studio. That is Katie Jones. Katie Jones is a music curator, producer, and event promoter. She resides in Brooklyn, and she founded a very interesting music series that caught my attention, and that is The Revolution.
Yes, ma'am.
So please tell us a little bit, Katie, about this platform. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely. The revolution started when I got to National Sawdust, right when I got to New York about 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I had moved here from Los Angeles and lived there about 6 years and just needed a change of pace. Got here, started hitting the ground running, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the industry and what I wanted to kind of give back. Mm-hmm. National Sawdust was my first stop, and it's where I've been. It absolutely is. It's where I've been since I actually landed here, which, National Sawdust in general is a nonprofit that's run by all artists. It's an artist-led nonprofit that really centers its mission around discovery of emerging art, and emerging genres. So definitely when I started with Sawdust, it was more of a classical avant-garde venue. Yes. And being in the heart of Brooklyn and living in Brooklyn and having a lot of my best friends that I've known for over 10 plus years from Brooklyn, I thought it was only right to give back to a lot of the genres that actually reside there and actually started there outside of the classical world, more on the popular level. And that's really where I started to kind of get my wheels turning about the revolution and what that really meant to me. When I was first in New York, the first couple of weeks I was really hitting the jam session scene very hard in Harlem and in the Lower East Side.
So can you pause there just for a moment? Because I found this all interesting.
Yes.
When you said that you were dealing with all these bands and in Harlem and the Lower East Side and Williamsburg, and I'm like, where are these jam sessions being held?
Sure. There's actually a lot of them. The first Monday of every month, there's a session at Come On Everybody called The Jelly. It's a funk session, and that is in Brooklyn. And it is actually really great. It's from 7 to 11. So it's a little bit earlier on the jam session side. A lot of these start around 10 and end around 3 a.m. So this is actually one that's doable for people that have 9 to 5s for sure, where you want to get out, see some music, hang out, great drink specials. And then every Thursday, every single week is a killer jam session, hip hop based at Arlene's Grocery in the Lower East Side. It is amazing. I literally go there every week. Did not go yesterday, but I know that I missed some great things. It's actually They have a house band there that's actually run by Phase One, who's been in the hip hop scene for a very long time. Incredible MC, and then also a vocalist that's actually just won a Grammy for Chance the Rapper's album, Jonathan Horde, who's actually been a part of the Revolution series. I went to college with him as well, and just incredible musicians. It's usually the first stop when people get off tour and they just want to jam with other people. So yeah,
I'm happy about that because it used to be that in New York City, somebody famous, they have a concert, they're in New York.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I finished my gig. All right, where can I go
Totally.
so I could just hang out with other musicians and
Yep.
people who want to have a drink, and then we just, jam.
Absolutely.
And then so many places
Yep.
have closed
Sure,
in New York
absolutely.
City. It's refreshing
Yes.
to hear that new places are open,
Good.
but nobody knows where they are.
Yes, I know. And in Harlem too. I mean, there was a Harlem Sessions that literally, was not just jazz based. It was more just free blues, free hip hop, free jazz as well. And that started at Gin Fizz and ended up moving down to Ginny's. There's also the Shed that's in Brooklyn. There's actually a lot, that you can find, definitely Brooklyn based and in the city as well. So, a lot of the musicians that are on the Revolution series, I've been to college with and I see very regularly at these jam sessions, and being around them really inspired me to kind of give back and kind of get them more opportunities, a bigger platform to be able to perform for audiences that they normally wouldn't perform with, and be able to mix genres within an evening. So the Revolution kind of started in March of last year. We just had our first year anniversary this past March, and we've definitely housed over 295 musicians in our first year, which is pretty incredible. I do all the curating and all of the producing from start to finish myself, as far as getting everybody handled from when they walk in the door to everything before they even get to the venue. So I know most of these artists very personally, and I take it really personally, and I think that their journey is really important, just as important as the audience participation and what they feel as well, you know?
But no, that's very encouraging to know, because so many places, music venues, have closed. So that's why I've been struggling with National Sawdust for over a year.
Yes.
Saying, hello, how can we, work together? Because you're one of the few music venues left. You have the music hall that's also in Williamsburg down the street.
Yep.
You also have the Knitting Factory that left Tribeca and went to Brooklyn. And Manhattan has lost a lot of these venues.
Totally.
I don't know if there are any in Queens or in the Bronx. And so the point is, these music venues are shrinking, as well as studios to record.
Absolutely.
Studios to practice. I was just in the Guitar Center the other day, because I'm about to take some lessons, and they created these little booths so that you can actually, either rehearse or have a lesson.
Like isolation booths.
Yeah,
cool.
Because the need for space is so critical.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what they did. They turned their space around so they could create these booths. They rent them out.
Yeah.
They offer lessons there. So it's just refreshing to know that something is bubbling back in New York.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really pride myself on, it's not just about putting these artists on the map, but, how do we really find them and how do we cultivate them? I mean, honestly, I want artists that are really doing something, that have a bigger meaning, that really can give back to change and activism within the music world, like we used to really focus on back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I think rock and roll may be focused on it in the 80s and 90s, but between blues and jazz and a lot of hip hop artists and soul, I mean, I really feel like the majority of that soul, within that music and within those genres was felt a while ago, and it's kind of lost its essence. And I'm just here to remind everybody that there's a really big resurgence happening in the millennial community with this. And I feel like a lot of these artists that we've kind of showcased at the Revolution are really on the brink of something big.
Give us some names.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of us don't even know
Absolutely.
who these artists may be.
Absolutely. I live with 3 female musicians that are incredible in their own right, and all of them have performed at Sawdust multiple times, and they have been a part of the Revolution. Some of them have debuted some of their projects there. Nakara Warren is a vibraphone player, Brooklyn-based. She's born and raised here, and she is pretty much one of my best friends in the entire world, but also is an incredible educator, an incredible musician, arranger, and just a jack of all trades. She's a mastermind, and her project Black Wall Street is something to definitely keep your eye out for.
I saw that.
Absolutely. You definitely want to keep an eye out for that. Haley Neiswanger is a female saxophone player.
I used to play sax when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
she has a new project coming out called Mason, and it is very transformative and just really takes you on a journey of just soul searching throughout the entire album. Her album release is coming out November 10th, and it's at New Blue. You guys got to check that out. Latasha Alcindor is another roommate of mine who is actually an artist in residence at Sawdust. She's our first hip hop artist in residence, and she is a diva to the max in the most beautiful way possible. She deserves all the applause and the glory in the world, honestly. The projects that she's been working on over the past year are incredible. Black was a very big project that we actually debuted at National Sawdust. She just came out with a mixtape called Teen Night at Empire, which really gives back to Teen Night at the Empire Skating Ring that got, torn down because of gentrification in Brooklyn. So she really highlights just being a woman of color and her, interjections within living in Brooklyn and within the changes of everything. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Hoard, that I mentioned before, is an incredible male vocalist. Mm-hmm. And also Arthur Moon is an indie rock band that has had the privilege to be a part of this whole changing genres and community. Also Unity. They're from Tribeca and Harlem, and these guys are incredible. They are Afro-Cuban jazz musicians, and they can play.
Wow.
So, those are just a couple to name a few. And then Hillary Capps, Mary Akba, and then on bass orchestra are actually performing tomorrow for Volume 19. And that is a little bit of mixture of soul music, singer-songwriter, and then Ethiopian 50s and 60s rock and roll. Woo! So it's going to be really cool, Woo! Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that some young people have really found, or rather carved out a way where they can express their voice.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
It's kind of difficult. Nowadays, it's very competitive. You're dealing with the internet where everything is splintered. Sure. It's all about money. And sometimes you just want to just do your thing.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you guys are doing both. You're doing your thing, but you're building gradually a brand, an audience that can, evolve with you.
Absolutely. And it's really about supporting each other. I think that's the biggest thing across all of this, is that we really just show up for each other. Time and time again, volume after volume, you see the same musicians come out or the different genres to support different things that they normally wouldn't. And I think that's the best takeaway for me, to see how many people show up for one another that haven't necessarily been in the same room. And to see how many people get gigs off of that and different opportunities, and, just figuring out who's playing with who and who's on the scene and who's new that I haven't heard of, and it's literally from start to finish, from Volume 1 to Volume 19 where we stand now. It's been nothing but a pleasure.
Okay. And see, I really do believe that because, we live in a digital world, you have to sort of make yourself available for different appreciations. It's how you do grow. I always like to use the example of open source, which is more technology based. Yeah. But it's like, open source is like a river that's flowing, and you could take elements out as you need so that you can collaborate and also, compose a new sort of music or a new sort of artwork that others can actually, understand and like. If they don't like it, well, there'll be more.
Absolutely.
The point is that everybody's engaged.
Yep.
And that's the important thing. And then you could do it from different age groups, different backgrounds, different languages. As long as people are engaged, that to me is hope.
Absolutely. And that's really truly what the revolution stands for, is hope in this time and day, and really being able to give back to community and being able to have a place where people can come, let their hair down, and just really relax for an evening.
You sure Prince wasn't a part of all of this?
Man, I wish.
Oh my gosh. God, I miss him.
Me too, man.
Oh, that was great. Well, we had a fabulous time together. Now, tell people how they can learn more about the revolution.
Sure,
online.
Absolutely. You can go to nationalsawdust.org and find the revolution landing page there. Also, you can go to my Instagram, which is @KJFromVA. Every single volume will always be up there live. You can find flyers, links to different people's performers' pages, and also to different events that I'm producing with my production company, Koozie Productions. Mm-hmm. Also, the Rev Music on Facebook @The Revolution NYC will get you what you need to get. And then also, I hope to see you guys tomorrow. It starts at 10 p.m. Hillary Capps, singer-songwriter, Mary Akba, soul singer-songwriter, and then on bass orchestra. $15 at the door. You can use...
Well, we can't talk about prices, but yes. Just let people know where they can go.
Absolutely. If you need anything, you can email me, call me. You have all my information all over those social media outlets. So definitely hope to see you guys there.
That's great. So I just want to say thank you so much. And I'm so glad I finally connected with National Sawdust.
Me too.
Hopefully now maybe we could do some things together.
Absolutely.
So
I would love that.
Therefore, we can, I think there's room now for, different generations to
Yes.
talk with each other, background information. I find that when I talk to millennials, they're looking for a different sort of content.
Absolutely.
They realized that their education was a little bit rushed and it lacked the roots that it was looking for. And so I guess now my generation, just slightly older, we can offer some context. And I think that's great because the more context, the better, the more people come together, the more everybody interacts with each other.
Absolutely.
So I think this is great. Thank you so much. I will be following up with you. Your lineup so far has been extremely impressive.
Thank you.
You should feel very good about what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
in
Savona.
the studio.
Awesome.
Have a great evening.
Thanks.
And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just had Katie Jones on the show with us. That was a delightful conversation, learning about what young millennials are doing in the music scene in New York City, all over New York City. And now we have another wonderful, brilliant woman joining us, Tanya Molina. And Tanya, she is the founder of the African Latin Roots, correct?
African Roots in Latin America.
African Roots in Latin America. And I met Tanya via an acquaintance of hers, Tim O'Toole, who has been on our show. And we were talking with her about African textiles, and the whole conversation about Afro-Latinos has been exploding, quite frankly. I reached out to PBS. I'm still hoping they might help me to get Skip Gates on the air because he was talking, he did a whole series
Yes.
of blacks in Latin America, and there's a lot of new information that people don't know. What I learned from Tim is that there's this huge population in the Bronx,
Right.
from folks who are from British Honduras, Belize, and I was like amazed. I was shocked. And so I'm so glad that you're here with us to talk about the festival that you're doing this weekend. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, African Roots in Latin America, it's a gathering of people to talk about spirituality, to talk about what's happening in the community as well as traditions, the drums, the music, what is the representation, what is the meaning of each instrument, what are the types of spirituality that people used to practice. That's what we are trying to achieve tomorrow because people need to know where they come from and also how they can be able to learn going forward with the right people, right?
Correct. I like to say moving forward
Right.
with culture. Yes.
Right. Because if you don't go back and how Katie was saying before, we have to go back into what are traditions, what did our grandparents used to do, and how we can learn from them. A lot of these people are dying.
Yes.
And the information is getting lost.
Yes.
Because a lot, especially, I am Garifuna from Honduras, right? And a lot of our tradition is always spoken for whoever was before you. Now, some of these traditions are getting written or we have books. However, the best is going to the source. That is the way to learn. So that is one of the main focus of African Roots in Latin America. Get back to these traditions, learn, and have a discussion. So once after the discussion is over, we're going to also have performances from different groups in the African diaspora, Afro-Colombians, Haiti and Dominican Republic, Garifunas from Honduras, Belize, and Guatemala. And we also are going to have a group from Peru who are going to do some sort of Fusion, which is, they call it Afro Zumba, which they trying to teach women how to exercise and also learn their culture with and their styles of dances.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this sounds great, because there is so much about Latin America that people don't know. And I have been in conversation with a lot of different people trying to reclaim their roots. Like for me, I've learned a lot in the last few months just about the fact that Africans did not just come to the mainlands.
Right.
They went to the Caribbeans first.
Right. That is correct.
And then you had the Tainos, the Arawaks, and the Caribs.
Right.
And how the Caribs used to follow behind the Tainos and the Arawaks. And the tantalizing, as I say, information about the Caribs, where they were fierce warriors. They also were cannibals, too. They also chased Columbus off Santo Domingo, which is now the Dominican Republic. But the point is, they still wanted to maintain their culture, their language, and when the Europeans were coming, they actually merged with many of the Africans, and they blended just like the Africans did in South Carolina and Georgia, the Gullah Islands, creating their own language, hybrid language, and so therefore it kept alive, everything that they were doing, the history, everything. So I find this fascinating. And is that going to be discussed a little bit too?
Yes, I am Garifuna. And Garifuna are combinations of Arawak, Carib, and Black. Right. Our language is Arawak and Carib for the most part, but it also has other combinations of influences, like you said, a couple of English, a little bit of French words involved. And we have been in Honduras for 218 years. As a resistance, as a movement, we are still trying to maintain our heritage here in New York with the dance company that's performing tomorrow, and that, right?
Okay.
The traditions, the language, and our structure of spirituality.
And the spirituality part is also very fascinating, because you're going to be talking about the different practices that some of us might have heard about but don't know too much about, correct?
Right, that is correct. We are going to have a priest of the Lukumi, or Santeria, as it's mostly known. We are also going to have a Garifuna Buye, who does traditional medicines and all this stuff, a spiritual communicator in our, we call it, she or he is the shaman of the community, right?
Okay.
Then we also going to have a Papa Boko, which is a Haitian/Dominican priest who's going to talk about that relationship and that spiritual form. So these three people are very knowledgeable of their practices, and they also interconnect. Some of them have also been baptized in some of the other religions as well. Yes, which is kind of interesting, and we will talk about that tomorrow.
Wow. Is Christianity mixed in there? Because I know that a lot of Africans actually kept their deities when they became Catholic, particularly, and so they masked them. Is that also going to be discussed?
That is a very interesting point, because that it will be a common denominator that all these three different practices do have, because Christianity in Latin America, especially Catholicism, it's a big part of the culture, right? So how can you maintain a culture if you mask it somehow? Then you can be able to keep those traditions. And with the Lukumi and with the Haitian Voodoo, a lot of the saints represent a particular Orisha or a particular deity within their whatever practice that they do. So you're going to be practicing for somebody and praying for it, but in reality, you're praying for somebody else underneath.
Okay. I thought that was very interesting. I'll never forget, I was in college, and someone I really respected, her name was Jean, and she said, "Oh, you know that's what really happened." I said, no, that can't be true. That's not possible. And she was right, that people mask their orishas, their deities, with Catholic saints. And then I learned this year how Spain and Portugal and the Pope was very involved when it came to marriage in Latin America. So they allowed the African slaves to marry, but they also condoned intermarriage. So there was a lot of intermarriages that were going on. So this is why you have these blends of people and rainbow colored populations, because of the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the Pope allowing all these things to happen. So I think this is really great information, new information for a lot of us, because we didn't know all of this beforehand, wouldn't you say?
That is correct. I think there has been a remerge, a renaissance per se. And also another thing that's happening, you have to remember the religions back then, some people didn't want to come out, like being inside a closet to a certain extent, right? One, it's because of what people will say or what the media will say. Ooh, that's voodoo from some sort of cinema watch or zombies or whatever the case may be. Others, because they wanted to keep it private, because certain secrets, because of certain things, they just wanted to keep those things aside, right? And then now it seems like, okay, we have to be proud of whatever traditions that we practice, because as we go along with the years, it's getting lost.
Yeah.
Or tradition is getting passed on incorrectly.
And I think that is what's happening. A lot of traditions and information is not being passed correctly. And I think it's important that we do get it right. Not so much to be purists, but so therefore people can feel proud from where they came from. Unfortunately, because now we're dealing with Charlottesville, we're dealing with all of these controversies about Confederate sculptures or Christopher Columbus. There's a lot of misinformation. I don't want those sculptures to come down. I want correct information about what happened during those time periods to go on, because then that would reduce all that animosity and people feeling charged and lost a little bit or about to be lost, because you have people on the other side saying, well, I'm proud of, my Southern roots. You should be proud of your Southern roots, but you need to get it right, too.
Right.
You need to get it right. So therefore, all people feel good about themselves. Well, I'm so glad. What made you decide to start this particular festival?
Well, one of the things that I noticed is that, once again, lack of information and have the right people involved. You always get, New York is a huge place, you always get different people doing different things, right? However, I still felt, I always attend all these different events, I always felt that there was a lack of true or not true, but good information put out there, right?
Okay.
So that you can have some sort of interaction. And that's how I decided to start this project, which I am super happy, and I have gotten great reviews, and I'm hoping that everybody gets involved. And I also hope that it continues, right?
Yes.
And most important, that it remains with the structure of teaching and learning and sharing.
Because I believe you said 60% before the show of your festival is going to be talk, and 40% of it is going to be music, correct?
Right.
So you're kind of like using the music as an engagement tool for the audience, but you definitely want them to get that knowledge.
Right. The first session, as I mentioned earlier, it will be an informative session, right? So once you get the tools, then you get to see how the tools work.
Yes.
And that's what I want to showcase, because we have the marriage of the two. Then you can go home with a clear understanding of what it's that it's been presented.
Okay. Now, I just had a quick question about language, because I think language is important. When you talk about the Garifuna culture, are you talking about Spanish, or are you talking about Creole, or are you talking about Portuguese, French?
Garifuna people have their own language that is Garifuna. That's what they speak in their native villages. That's the first, what the mothers and the children and the whole family, that's what everybody speaks. If you live in a village, you speak Garifuna.
Okay.
And it's not Spanish. And as I mentioned, from the root that I've heard, and it has been scientifically proved, is Arawak and Carib, with mixture of English, French, and to some extent a little bit of Spanish as well.
Okay, and also some African languages as well?
Well, some people say that it does have it, but predominantly are those two,
Okay.
Arawak and Carib.
Okay, all right. And that's a pretty distinct and, well, rather two distinct indigenous languages and cultures. And no one knows exactly where the Tainos and the Arawics and the Caribs came from, but we believe from North America coming all the way down to South America, they have been nomadic people that we should all, learn more about.
Our Garifuna people originate, our motherland is St. Vincent.
Ah, okay.
So from St. Vincent, we were expelled to Honduras.
Okay.
And then from Honduras, we moved through the whole...
Go ahead, continue.
Is it still open?
Yes.
Okay. From Honduras, it went all the way to Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
all these regions have Garifuna towns.
Well, great. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. I've been tracking you down for quite some time.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So I am so happy for you. This is a great event in my home borough. I was born and raised in the Bronx.
Awesome.
So this is great. And I take pride that we do reach out to art and culture throughout all 5 boroughs. And I'm very determined to continue to do that. So thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just had Tanya Molina, who is the founder of African Roots in Latin America, on the show. It was a great pleasure. In fact, the entire broadcast was wonderful, with Barbara talking about contemporary Chinese art, with Katie talking about the new music scene that's a blend of emerging bands and individual artists, with Tanya talking about Afro-Latinos. It really was a jam-packed, wonderful evening of great talk. And I just want to let our listeners know that tomorrow, WBAI is collaborating with the Apollo Theater, and there's going to be a community talk, and there's going to be several panelists. It will be moderated by our own Gary Bird, and it's going to be talking about, urban conditions, social justice, how do we move forward. We will also have the librettist from We Shall Not Be Moved, the opera that will be premiering at the Apollo Theater next week. So it's going to be wonderful, and it is free. So you can come out tomorrow at 4 p.m. at the Great Apollo Theater on 125th Street off of 8th Avenue, and you can get a free ticket, and you can join us to hear this wonderful community talk that's going to take place tomorrow afternoon. So with that said, I just want to wish everyone a great week. We finally got fall. That's my season, fall. And WBAI will be starting their fund drive. Please support WBAI during their fund drive so we can keep offering great programming to our audience across the 5 boroughs of New York City. So have a great week, everyone, a great weekend. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
This is Imhotep Gary Bird inviting you to a WBAI free-for-all Apollo Uptown Hall. Movement required. Saturday, September 30th at 4 p.m. Yeah, it's Radio GBE back live at the Apollo. I'll co-moderate a community conversation and panel with Philly broadcast activist Solomon Jones discussing police community relations and the role of artists as activists. We'll also revisit this year's anniversary of the historic deadly clash between the government and the citizens of Move through the eyes of 2017. Plus, we'll feature an an excerpt of the acclaimed film Let the Fire Burn with director Jason Osdorf and deal with the question, what you gonna do if they come for you? Also joining us, civil rights activist Tamika Mallory, Mark Bamuthi Joseph of We Shall Not Be Moved, former NYPD detective Graham B. Witherspoon, and WVAI's illustrious blacks. Apollo Town Hall, movement required. Saturday, September 30th at 4 p.m. live at the Apollo. Register in advance for your free tickets. Visit WBAI.org or ApolloTheater.org.
WBAI listeners, we need your help and power. Wednesday, October 4th, the judge will be making a decision regarding the Empire State Realty Trust's case against WBAI, and our station's survival is at stake. The Empire State Realty Trust is the owner of the Empire State Building, where WBAI's transmitter has been located for decades. The trust is demanding immediate payment of over $2 million and refuses to negotiate. They've been charging nonprofit WBAI 4 times the market rate in rent and fees. Come to the courthouse. We must show that we will not allow WBAI to be shut down. Come to court Wednesday, October 4th, 9:30 at 60 Center Street. That's Wednesday, October 4th, 9:30 at 60 Center Street. Together we can save WBAI.
On what would have been his 81st birthday, the southwest corner of West 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard will be renamed Ilambe Brath Way. This in honor of a native son who achieved international acclaim for his intellect and commitment to struggle for a better world. Family, friends, and activists will all gather at the intersection from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the naming ceremony. From 1 to 3 p.m., refreshments and cultural presentations will take place on the second floor art gallery of the Adam Clayton Powell Jr. State Office Building. It's all free and open to the public. For additional information, visit the Ilambe Brath Foundation website at www.ilambebrathfoundation.org.
Heroes make the sunrise in the morning.
On Sunday, October 1st at 11 p.m., Sugar in My Bowl presents drummer, composer, bandleader, and pianist Jack DeJohnette. Join us as we discuss some of Jack DeJohnette's career and his upcoming New York appearance. That's Sunday, October 1st at 11 p.m., right here on WBAI New York, 99.5 FM, and WBAI.org on the web.
Hi, my name is Jossie. I'm a volunteer at WBAI. Volunteers, producers, and management at WBAI have come to the conclusion that fund drives have become too damn long. Don't get it twisted. We love connecting with our listeners and are honored by every single dollar your generosity has inspired you to give the station. But we prefer our unique WBAI programming to long fundraising periods. WBAI is committing right now to making a change. WBAI management is committed to shortening the length of our marathons. That's why from now until October 2nd, we're conducting a quiet campaign to raise funds prior to the start of the actual marathon. Visit WBAI.org to make a pledge and follow our progress via the thermometer on the website. There are new donation buttons which allow for smaller donations for listeners. If we can raise $50,000, we'll shorten our fall fundraiser by 2 days. Every little bit helps, so consider making a pledge today at WBAI.org. And thank you, as always, for your support.
Hello, I'm David Rothenberg, and I'll be the keynote speaker at the 11th Anniversary Awards Dinner for Citizens Against Recidivism, a not-for-profit organization that addresses the needs of the formerly and the currently incarcerated. The event will be held at the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center on Saturday night, October 21st, from 5:30 till 9. For ticket information, please go to www.citizensinc.org or call 347-626-7233, extension 3. Again, for ticket information, please go to www.citizensinc.org or call 347-626-7233. And don't forget extension 3. I'm David Rothenberg, and I hope to see you there.
And once again, this is WBAI New York, 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. The previous program was State of the Arts NYC, excuse me, hosted and produced by Savona Bailey-McClain, heard Fridays at 5 p.m. Before we go into the next program, which of course happens to be Radio GBE with Imhotep Gary Bird, once again I wanted to announce this event that's happening tomorrow as well. Chelsea Community Fundraiser and Block Party presents For the People of Puerto Rico. It's an event that will benefit those who have been suffering, who have been experiencing some stuff, as you know, stuff down there. It's happening tomorrow, September 30th, at the NYC Museum School inside the O. Henry Campus Park, West 17th Street between 8th and 9th Avenues, starting at 12 noon until 6 p.m., and it features the music DJ Kamala, Rich Medina, Psycho Les from the Beatnuts, Loft Kid Lewis, Voodoo Ray, to name a few. And also, for a nominal fee, all the proceeds will go to RSC for Life,